Hey everybody, this is Pastor Jennifer, lead pastor here at Jackson Revival Center Church, and we are so glad to welcome you into the break room. We've got none other than Dr. Jennifer Riley Collins back in the break room with us today. We're so glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Look, there's a lot going on around us. Unfortunately, again, we're dealing with the situation with Dante Wright. And I thought that it would be great to bring you in for us to just talk about what are your rights when you're pulled over, different things. I just saw a clip this morning locally where someone was pulled over, a lot of unnecessary interaction, and people need to know their rights. So let's talk a little bit about that. When you get pulled over, if you don't know why you're being pulled over, do you have the right to ask?
You definitely have the right to ask because the officer should have some level of probable cause or suspicion for pulling you over.
Okay.
Of course, don't give officers a reason to pull you over, changing lanes without, signaling, playing your music loud because you may be in a noise ordinance. If you are, let's just be real, Pastor, if your car is full of the ooh-wee odor.
Gotcha.
Maybe you don't want to be driving with your windows down. Because you may end up at the same stop sign. But, I'm not in any way suggesting that the fault is a person who gets pulled over. Sometimes our officers do police more aggressively than they should. I just shared with you before we went on air that I had gotten pulled over recently without a reason. And the officer was very aggressive with me. Little did he know that he was speaking to a licensed attorney.
Right.
And so, I'm always glad to be here because everybody's not an attorney. Everybody's mama's not an attorney.
Right.
And let me just point out, when the police do stop you, if you get arrested, your mother is not the lawyer.
Right.
Okay? So don't call your mama, call a lawyer. Or call your mama and say, call a lawyer and I'll call you back.
Right.
And moms, don't get into the place of what are you doing, what's asking, because there is no mother-child privilege. Right? There is an attorney-client privilege. And I know I'm kind of touching on a lot of things, Pastor, but, you have a right to refuse to have your vehicle searched.
Okay.
Officer has to have consent to search, or there has to be some exigent circumstance that gets them around that. If they see a gun lying on the seat, if they see paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia, and it's open where they can see it. But to search your car where nothing is laid out in plain sight, officer has to have consent to search. And so for young people, I will tell you, if an officer stops you and asks you for consent to search, you can say, and particularly if that car's not registered in your name, you can say, I don't have the authority to give you consent.
Right.
Because this is not my vehicle. This is my parents' vehicle. Okay. That way, officer, you're being respectful. You're not being flippant. Because the next thing they're going to say is, well, fine, we'll just tow the car. I would rather you pay the tow and all of that than if you're riding dirty. Okay.
And for those watching who may not know what it means, riding dirty.
You have some drugs. Your friends may have some drugs. You have an open container of alcohol in the car. You may have a stolen good in the car. So if you're riding dirty, then you don't want to have the vehicle searched, because I'm telling you, ultimately it's going to cost your family more to pay for the lawyer, to pay for the bail, which you have a right to. I need you all to understand you have a right to bond and bail. The presumption, however, should be that you get that not that you're not offered bail, but that you are released without the cost of bail, that you released on your own recognizance. That should always be the presumption.
Okay, so let's say somebody's being pulled over. The officer says, you were under the limit. That's their probable cause for pulling you over.
Under the speed limit.
You're doing 65 and a 70. And the officer asks you to present your license. You do, respectfully. But they start asking you a lot of questions. Do you have to answer every question the officer is asking?
So remember this. Tune to KYMS. It's not a radio station. It's keep your mouth shut. Okay? You have to give the officer your name. You can give the officer your address. But that whole additional line of inquiry that's not related to the reason that he stopped you,
right? You
don't have to answer. The question you should then ask is, am I under arrest? If the officer says, no, you're not under arrest, then officer, when you're finished with me, I'm ready to go now. Am I free to leave? If the officer says you're not free to leave, you're under arrest. You're being detained. And when that happens, that's a trigger. Your right to an attorney, your Sixth Amendment rights, they kick in at that point when you are under arrest. All of those Miranda rights that you hear about, you hear on TV, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. All of those things attach at the time that you are not free to leave. Because if you're not free to leave, you are detained. So at that point, you say, I want a lawyer, and you say nothing else.
So they do not have a right to search your car.
Not without consent.
Without your consent. And if you do not give them consent, what's going to happen?
Depending on the officer, to be very honest with you, officers have a lot of discretion. They have a lot of authority, Pastor. And so, and I don't mean to sound anti-police because I'm not, Right. I have good friends. I have young men that have grown up with my sons that are police officers, but not every, sometimes we all have bad days. And maybe you just rolled up on that officer on the day when he wasn't having a good day and he just being overly aggressive. Some days they wake up every day in a bad mood because they got a gun on their hip, and so what you should do is always try to be respectful,
definitely,
but always know your rights. Okay, so what am I being stopped for? The officer tells you some bogus stuff. You say, well, you know what, officer? Okay, here's my license. Here's my registration. Here's my insurance. Those are the three things that you have to produce. And then I'm free to go. Am I free to go? If they say no, then, just go ahead and prepare yourself to go to jail. Now, let me say this to you. Everybody pretty much has a cell phone. Smartphone with recording capability.
Correct.
If you are being stopped at the same time that you are reaching for your registration, go ahead and reach to hit record. It helps you.
Right.
Some of the jurisdictions don't have body cams, so we can't rely on that footage. Right. Some of the policies in the districts allow officers to field edit. That means they turn it on, turn it off. Gotcha. So they may not have it on. Now that's not a best practice in the use of body cams, but some police departments don't have good body cam policies if they have body cams, and so you can't count on that. So for your own self, record, go live if you feel like it's a situation where your safety is being jeopardized by the police officer. Right. It keeps you safe. It keeps them safe. It keeps them honest. It keeps you honest.
And I'm glad you just mentioned that too, because I'm thinking about, small towns. It's dark. There's no one around and an officer is pulling you over. Do you have the right to go, to wait until you get into a well-lit area?
So here's the best practice I would tell you for that, Pastor. Okay. You call 911 yourself. Okay? And say, look, an officer, I'm on Terry Road. Officer is attempting to pull me over. I am compliant. I'm going put your flashers on. But if you don't feel comfortable being pulled over in a dark place, just 911, the officer's trying to pull me over. I'm being compliant, but I don't feel safe, and so I'm going to continue to move to a lit area.
Right.
Don't speed up. Slow down, so the officer knows you're not trying to run.
Right.
So.
Okay.
But yes, ma'am, you have a right to your own self-defense, so to speak.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And so let's talk also. So, as pastors, we have people to reach out on a pretty consistent basis. When people get in trouble, they feel comfortable reaching out to their pastor to get guidance in how to move forward. One thing that people sometimes reach out about is, Pastor, 8 years ago, I had a situation. Maybe it was
before Christ,
a misdemeanor.
Yes.
But that being on their record has hindered their ability to get a good job, and so they're looking to get things expunged. Well, not everything can be expunged.
That's correct.
And so let's kind of talk about that, the decisions people are making, early on in life, thinking, because I used to work with adolescent offenders. And so some of them, their thinking was, I can kind of do what I want to do right now because I'm an adolescent. And they think it's not going to follow them. But sometimes they end up doing things that's actually going to follow them the rest of their life. Yes. Everything is not going to be expunged just because you're younger. Right. So let's kind of talk about risk and reward and right. some of that.
So it all carries, Pastor. So youth court records, because youth court is considered a civil court, right?
Okay.
Because the belief is that children cannot be held criminally liable, okay? Because of adolescent brain development and all of the science. However, if you are participating in certain activities, even though you may be a minor, you can be tried as an adult.
Right.
Okay? So that then...
Especially when it comes to loss of life.
Right. So if you're dealing, if you're participating in something where a deadly weapon was being used and all of that, then you could be charged as an adult. So now that whole... I'm a child, it's not going to follow me. It just followed you straight over into adult
because you just put yourself in the position of being an adult.
Exactly. And so that sticks with you. Misdemeanors, so let's say you are an adult, you're 18 and you commit a misdemeanor. You're found guilty of a misdemeanor. Misdemeanors are expungible.
Okay. And let's list what some of those misdemeanors are.
Okay.
What falls under the category of misdemeanor? What falls under the category of felony?
Okay. So anything that's going to carry a penalty of greater than a year, okay, that you can be imprisoned for greater than a year is a felony. Okay. That's going to be tried in the circuit court. So something that you would go to like city court for, which would be first time DUI, first time domestic violence. That is going to be a misdemeanor. Shoplifting under a certain amount can be handled as a misdemeanor. Shoplifting above a certain amount is going to be a felony. So if you don't know how much that bag is you lifting, so let's say you decided to go to Dillard's. You like the big Brahmin. Okay? That put you over $500. Okay? Well, that may have put you in the felony bracket. Okay? Where if you had just gotten a little small one, I'm not suggesting that you go shoplift anything.
No, we're not encouraging theft.
No, but it's that simple. And there's such a thin line. So I say, don't do any crime if you're not wanting to do the time or pay the costs. So misdemeanors are generally expungible. Eligible to be expunged.
And does a certain time period have to pass before that expungement can take place?
So on a misdemeanor, in municipal court, generally after you have completed the requirements of your penalty, whether that's community service, paying the recompense, so paying the money back, whatever the situation may be, then you could go back to court. Certain, okay? Some misdemeanors you have to wait a year. Okay. Now, felonies and misdemeanors, you can expunge multiple misdemeanors. Okay. You can only expunge one felony.
Okay. So what type of felonies can be expunged?
So it's easier to list what can't be expunged, okay? So there are about 13 different things, and I cannot list them all, but embezzlement. Okay. You cannot expunge embezzlement. Okay. Stuff that young people may find themselves, controlled substances, trafficking. So we talked a little bit earlier about trafficking, drugs. Okay. Drug trafficking. So drug trafficking. So let's say you went to the corner pharmacist, okay, and you picked up some marijuana, okay. If you picked up personal possession amount, okay, you need to know that personal possession is going to be less than a certain ounce, amount of ounces, okay? Where if it's over that, that could be considered that you're trafficking. Gotcha. Even though you only bought it for you. Gotcha. Okay? For your personal consumption. I was laughing
because it took me a second when you said corner pharmacist. I was first picturing a pharmacy and then I realized what you were saying.
So again, because you're not going out there, you may go and say, hey, give me, I don't know how you go buy drugs because I don't do that. But let's say it's a dime bag, whatever. And you say, well, you know what? It's a long weekend. Let me go ahead because I ain't got to come back and see you. Right. Don't do it because then you go down the street and you run into that roadblock. Okay. Now you have enough to sell. Right. So now you're dealing with distribution of controlled substances, not expungible. I don't care if you did it when you were 21. That's going to stick with you forever and a day. Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Get a good lawyer so they can get it back down. Argue your case for you. Let's see. I talked about embezzlement and controlled substances, and I touched on embezzlement, Pastor, because we have a lot of young people that work in retail. Gotcha. Don't let anybody convince you to give them a 5-finger discount at the register. Okay, that's embezzlement. You're stealing. Yes. Violent crimes are not expungible. Other things like issues of trust. So forging checks, not expungible. Gotcha. Okay, yes. So don't forge a check, and these are a lot of things that young people who particularly are in, in situations where they're in retail industry. You dealing with somebody else's money. It's somebody else's money. It's not yours. Wait on your paycheck. That's right. Or people who work with elderly folk, and so these people put their trust in you, and they say, okay, well, we're going to go to the store. Well, so-and-so, go ahead and write that check for me. And now you wrote that check, but then you also wrote another one. So forging instruments, financial instruments is also non-expungible. Gotcha. So most other things are expungible. And so a lot of times when people get felonies, they think that they can't vote. Gotcha. Not every felony is disenfranchising. So I just want to make sure I share that because it's not the end of life. Right. But, some things are going to carry with you. So it's best not to. And if you have multiple felonies, you can only get one expunged.
So what is the most concerning thing that you're seeing right now as it relates to people not knowing their rights?
When people don't know their rights, they run their mouth. Okay. Gotcha. Now, yes, if you are a witness to a crime, we want you to trust the police. We want you to come forward because that helps all of us to be safe, right? That helps families to get accountability when their loved one has been harmed, when a house has been broken into. Nothing makes you feel more violated other than, your physical person being violated and then your sanctuary being violated, your home. And so, and we want the Madias on our block to feel comfortable in their homes. And so if you know that that's Bubba down the street that's breaking in everybody's house. Don't
Right.
tell it.
Right,
You know,
right.
you know, be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem.
Right, right.
But let's say you Bubba. Okay, Bubba, now you done got caught.
Mm-hmm.
You have a right to an attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you have a right to defense. You have a right to bail or to be released on your own recognizance. But when you go in there and you start trying to you run your mouth too much, you may catch a few other charges because the police got case dockets that they need to clear. Mm-hmm. You know, and so as a former criminal defense attorney, because I don't practice criminal defense anymore, I always would say just be quiet. Okay. Remember that there is no privilege between you and anyone else besides you and your attorney.
Gotcha.
So moms, I know you want to tell your children, just tell the truth and let's go home. Police officers will tell you they're gonna let you go if you just tell them the truth. They're not. They're gonna lock you up.
Right.
So, mom, don't do that. You know, if you're gonna bring attorney in the room, let the attorney do their job. You do your job as a parent and get on your knees and pray for your child. But don't try to be the lawyer.
Right. Right.
Because there are some nuances to things that get said, and what you don't want is, as mom, you don't want to get called to testify against your child.
Right.
What did your child tell you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Because there is no privilege there.
Right. So for people who can get things expunged, typically how long does that process take?
It shouldn't take long, Pastor. It you know, let's say you went to a clinic. If you come to a clinic, all your paperwork,
about a legal clinic.
A legal clinic, yes. So the first step is that you would go to a court, go to the court clerk, and ask for an abstract of your criminal record. Okay? So, because the lawyer is going to have that to know what was ordered. Not just what you got charged with, but what was ordered. Because you have to complete all of the requirements of that order.
So if that was restitution or community service or... then those things, you have to have proof that they've been completed.
That they've been completed, and that's when if on a felony, that's when your 5-year clock starts ticking. Or a misdemeanor, that's when your 1-year clock starts ticking, because you cannot expunge until that time has expired. Some traffic offenses you can get off, but some you can't. DUI. So let's say you got the third DUI, which now makes it a felony. Okay? So now you've gone from, I got caught drunk, you still in misdemeanor land. Now you're in a felony. That is that's gonna sit for 10 years on your record.
And certainly if you got a DUI and someone was hurt, you caused an accident, life was taken, then that goes to a whole nother level.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. And so for the things that can be expunged, you're saying it takes a relatively short period of time, so as long as you've completed whatever was ordered by the judge. About how much can someone expect to pay?
About $150. About $150. That's the fee.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha. For expunging.
So if you went to a free clinic, you're just paying the fee. If you go to an attorney, it varies, Pastor, because there is no scale set for attorneys, and so
every situation I know is different depending on what you're trying to get off and all the.
So let's say the paperwork has been filed, that is then presented before the court. So the length of time for you to be able to get before a judge. And then the next step is, so don't just let a lawyer go present you before the judge and say, okay, the judge give you your expungement order. Now, all of that has to be sent to the crime data places like Mississippi Criminal Information Center, MCIC. Stuff has to be sent to the FBI, Now, let's talk about this one.
Okay.
You get stopped, you get arrested, your charge gets dismissed. All dismissals are expungible.
Okay.
Okay?
So that may be something for people to know. They may not think that it's even going to show up if it was dismissed.
Oh no.
So that's
you got stopped, you got arrested, you in the system.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So then, but if that charge gets dismissed, you want to get that off your record, because it does show when a company does a background check. Okay.
Right.
But there's no disposition. It just shows. It didn't say whether the case got dismissed or you got acquitted. Yeah.
It's amazing, because we've had people to apply for jobs, and of course we have to do a background check, and we've had things to come back that people didn't even know were on their record. And sometimes we have had someone who's had false information. The information on there was not them. And so that was a long drawn out process of trying to figure out how did it get there, and all of that. Unfortunately, sometimes people have a very common first and last name, and there may be 500 people in the system, but unfortunately it got assigned to that security number, and it's difficult. So what if somebody does have some false information on their record?
You can get that expunged.
Okay.
Yes,
okay.
ma'am.
So basically the same process. Okay. All right. All right. Anything else we need to know? I'm all about keeping people informed. I've seen a lot of unfortunate situations. Sometimes people knew what they were doing when they did it, and they got to live with it. But there have been some very unfortunate situations that I've seen people get caught up in, and sometimes they don't know how to get out of it. Sometimes it's guilt by association, things of that nature. So always love to equip people.
So be careful who you're riding with.
Yes.
Particularly if your friend's toting, right?
Especially our young folks.
Yeah.
Yes.
So if your friend has a weapon, you just sitting in the car. He goes in high head. He shoots somebody. He just went in to rob, steal something, but then he shot somebody. Yeah. That is now a capital offense. So that and he runs out and tells you drive.
Right.
So now you are an accessory to a capital offense. So now you're gonna carry that same charge that he did, even though, and you may have known he was going in there just to lift, a beer or whatever. But he got caught lifting, right? So in getting caught, then he shoots the clerk. Well, now somebody has died in the commission of another crime, and so that makes it capital. Capital means you can receive the death penalty. Okay. Now there is the Miller decision, and so young people don't receive death penalty, but you receive life. So now you're going to live the rest of your life, in prison, and that's really no place for you to be.
Right.
So when your mom and your aunties and your pastor are telling you, I really don't think you need to be hanging out with Scooter.
Right.
That's real.
Yeah.
Listen. It's a spirit of discernment. It's wisdom. Life has been lived. They've already seen it play out. So I encourage young people to listen, know who you're associating with.
Absolutely.
Because the cost of that relationship may be more than you're willing to pay.
Absolutely. We tell people all the time, there is no neutral relationship. And basically, your life ends up being the sum total of the 5 people you spend the most time with. If everybody you're spending time with is doing everything contrary to the Word of God, contrary to what you've been taught coming up, people have told you this is not good company. You can pretty much guarantee something is going to come up. It's prom season. I've seen young people, they're going to the prom, they leave with their date, mom and dad know who they're with. Okay, things, get crazy. They've decided to meet up with other people in other places, and somebody ends up getting arrested when, if you had been with who you said you were going to be with, doing what you said you were going to be doing, this would not have happened.
Right.
But you jumped in the car with people you didn't know. You jumped in the car with people you weren't familiar with. You didn't know the car was stolen. You didn't know the tag was out. You didn't know their license was suspended. And because you were there,
right,
here we go. So I've seen it happen 1,000 times,
and until there's some reform, and let me just say that reform has not come yet. Young African American men, you are 6 times more likely to be arrested than somebody than a white kid. That's statistical fact. That's not statistics that have been manipulated. That's statistical fact. So if you already know that somebody's looking at you 6 times more likely than they're looking at somebody else, always, and I hate, because I feel like that's inflicting unnecessary trauma, but I need you to be aware. Just be aware, because the cost is really more than you're willing to pay.
I tell people all the time, just because it's not right doesn't mean it's not reality.
Right.
And unfortunately, at this point, based on the number of lives we're seeing taken out, we have to deal with reality, and we have to prepare people, to respond appropriately. And I hate to say even appropriately, because we've seen situations where people did everything they knew to do, and still it went the wrong way.
Yes. The one of the worst days of my life was me screaming through a phone and telling my son, please comply, don't die.
Wow.
He had done nothing wrong. Police officers pulled him over, even though he gave proof that the vehicle he was driving, he was in lawful possession of, because it was my vehicle that I had given him. He still was taken out of the car, because he knew his rights. He grew up with me. Right. But the officer still accused him, even after giving the registration, of stealing the car he was driving. Young people, I know you want the fancy cars, and you deserve them. If your parents can provide that for you, if you can provide that for yourself, I'm not trying to say downplay, but I am saying don't have your music unnecessarily loud, bumping. Don't, and Josh wasn't. He went to get some dog food. And was headed back to school when that happened to him. So that's why I can comfortably say some law enforcement officers should not be law enforcement officers.
Right.
Because that officer was not listening. I listened to the whole thing, literally, to them pulling him out of the car and accusing him of stealing the car, even after he had given the registration. That showed, and so, I just encourage you, if you do encounter a police officer, remain respectful.
Yes.
Survive to live another day. Okay. Connect yourself with people who can help you get retribution, and can help you get right retribution. Right. Not vigilante.
It's better to deal with it on the back side than not live to deal with it. Right. Because
you're alive. Yes. Right. And I'm not saying every law enforcement officer out there is shooting people down, but the reality is, this ain't new. Right. For the African American community, it's just on film now.
Right. Absolutely. And that's what I was going to say. It's not that it hasn't been happening. It's just that more people have cell phones in their hands. More people have cell phones in their possession. And so, people have learned at this point, it's a safety, measure. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have that, it's going to be your word against law enforcement. And typically, judges tend to believe officers of the law. And so even though they may not be given, the facts as they are.
And we know you want to have nice stuff. Don't go to the mall and steal it, though. They got cameras everywhere.
Right. Yeah, so this is all of that.
You're not going to be seen.
I know. Yeah, and like you say, it's easier to work for things, do things the right way, than ending up on the wrong side of the law. So I was going to make that disclaimer. We're certainly not encouraging people toward negative behavior, not trying to support negative behavior in any manner. But we are just talking, unfortunately, these things come up. They happen,
and they ultimately cost you. They cost your family financially, because you got to pay a lawyer. You got, they cost you because you got to pay bail. They cost you because you're out of school. So you're constantly being set back. It's just not worth the cost. But if you do encounter, be respectful, know your rights, tune the KMS. If you are being detained, that means you cannot move forward. You're not free to go. And just call your mama and tell her to call a lawyer.
Yes. All right. Well, anything you want to add?
No, ma'am.
All right.
We talked about it all.
All right. Well, look, I want to thank you for taking the time to come in to empower the people, equipped with knowledge that is needed, especially in this day and time. And if you want to try to get in contact with Dr. Collins, she can be reached at Jennifer Riley Collins Consulting, LLC. We'll put the information here at the bottom of the screen. Tell us a little bit about Jennifer Riley Collins Consulting very quickly before we go.
Yes, ma'am. It's J. Riley Collins Consulting. I am semi-retired pastor, and so I've taken 32 years of military intelligence training and experience, 20 years of lawyering experience, and help basically entities that are setting up strategic planning, to do strategic planning, legal compliance, and so I'm helping good businesses do good work for good people.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And we appreciate all that you're doing in the community. And again, thank you for giving of your time today to make sure somebody has the information necessary, that they know their rights. All right. Well, we want to thank you guys for taking the time out to meet us in the break room today. Listen, if you found this information helpful, go on and share it with a friend, tag somebody that you know needs this information. And we want to invite you to meet us back next week, same time, same place. Until then, it is my sincere prayer that God's best will be yours in every area of your life. Y'all go make today a great day.